How y'all doing today? So, I wanted to talk to y'all. Somebody's this message is for specifically, but it's been kind of brewing, and I just been, letting it brew, kind of thinking on it, letting it simmer. And now I think it's time to pour it out. So, what's been on my mind is, as Christians, we're taught to believe for miracles. Believe for miracles, believe for miracles. Pray for a miracle, expect a miracle. And it takes a lot of faith to do that. And a lot of times in the Bible, you'll see it take a lot of faith to do that. But what I want to talk about today is what happens when God says no. What happens when you pray for that miracle and God says, no, this ain't gonna happen. What happens when you pray for something and God says, He gives you a clear, pretty much cut and dry no. And what to do, when God tells you no. Because I do believe that it takes a large amount of faith, like I stated, to accept those no's, you know what I mean? It takes a lot of faith to believe in miracles, but it also takes a lot of faith to be like, man, you know what? I'm going to take what you said, God, and understand that. I think it takes almost more faith to willingly understand not even understand, to willingly accept what God said and run with it when it's not what you wanted. A lot of times the miracle gives us hope, gives us something to look forward to, and I do believe miracles still happen. I do believe that it's easier sometimes to believe for a miracle because there's hope at the finish line. But when God gives you a no, there's no finish line. You already reached this said finish line. Now, the only thing left for you that you can possibly do is believe. So, with that being said, we're going to go over some examples of when God said no, and we'll tie it all in at the end. So first, I'm going to go on my cheat sheet. I got one. I don't want to leave y'all, astray. But the first example we're going to talk about is Numbers 13 through 14. In these two chapters, the Israelites are out there, and the Israelites are out there, and God's pretty much leading them, through the wilderness. And at first, they were with it. God delivered them from Pharaoh. God was watching over them. Delivering them from Egypt. God was watching over them, giving them food from heaven, literally. Handmade by God, And eventually they got impatient. And they were starting to grumble and, complain like humans do. So, hold on, my neighbor letting her dog out. I think they're gonna make a difference. But yeah, they began to complain and stuff like humans do, like we all do. And it was time for them to go to the promised land, but they had to take it. They had to go to war for it. Anyway, they had to go to war for it. And that was it for them. They were like, well, why we have to do this? I think we should just go back to Egypt. We should elect a leader among us, go back to Egypt, and just be slaves again. I'm tired of living under what God told us to do. And, it was Abraham and Isaac, and they were both there, and they prayed. They prayed for that young man. They prayed for the Israelites. They prayed, and it was like, God, just don't, you know, don't wipe us out. Don't kill us all. You know, basically, just asking God, just have mercy. And God decided, yeah, I'm gonna have mercy, but 40 more years, everybody's over 20. Everybody that did this complaining and disowning me and basically just condemning me, everybody that did that, they won't make it. They'll die in the promised land. Everybody over 20. And so when you start thinking about that, it's like, God, you know, they seen it. They seen it with their own eyes. And because of their disbelief, because of their faith, they're like lack of faith, God denied them entry into the promised land, which is wild. You know, imagine being out in the wilderness for 24 hours, and they were there already for 40 years and had to go for another 40 years because of their own actions, because they had to pay for that penalty. They had to pay for that sin that they committed against God. And so now everybody under 20 got to watch the older generation die. Not only that, they got to see the promised land, but go 40 more years thinking about it before they got to enter it. And it's an example of when God said no, and in that moment, in that instant, it was to build faith, to build believers, and that's what He did. And it's a drastic thing and a hard thing for us to understand. But for God, I mean, His ways are righteous, you know. So we move on to Genesis 22. This is one of my favorite examples, and it's Abraham and Isaac. If you don't know the story of Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac, pretty much Abraham was old and Sarah was old, and God had promised Abraham that He would make him the father of many nations, and He would do that through Isaac. So when Isaac was born, this is all Abraham had been looking forward to and hoping for. This is all Abraham had been looking forward to and hoping for, and it took Abraham by surprise when God told Abraham, hey, take your son up to the mountain and sacrifice him. So in Abraham's mind, just imagine, I mean, he just had to believe that, okay, no, this ain't who it had to be, right? Keyword no. This ain't, maybe, I don't know, but God is saying no to my blessing right now. I don't know what's going on. But instead of condemning God and going against what God had to say and complaining about it, we see Abraham do something that's wild to me. I'll use that word again, wild. He saddles up a horse. Well, not really. He didn't saddle up a horse. He saddled himself up. You know, he got his son. He told him, you know, hey, look, we're gonna be going to the top of this mountain, and we'll be back. Right? You know, I'll be back. And on the way there, his son was carrying the wood. And when they got to the top of the mountain, after struggling and climbing and eating, I'm sure, and talking, you know, after they got to the top of that mountain, God, well, okay, it's time for the sacrifice. It was time for Abraham to sacrifice his son. So He laid him down, and I can only imagine what's going through Abraham's mind, it was going through his son's mind. You know, both of them. It's not just Abraham's obedience, but it's both of their obedience. His son knew. They sacrificed animals all the time. And his son knew, hey man, I'm not seeing, we didn't bring a sheep. We didn't bring one of our firstborn cows. We didn't bring a lamb. Usually the cows carry the wood. Usually the sheep, you know, we kind of, you know, have them laying on this table, but he realized it was him, and he obeyed his father's will. Just like his father, Abraham. Abraham just obeyed and took him, you know. And in that instant, a ram literally ran out of the bush and was subdued. And Abraham took the ram and sacrificed him. And Abraham understood that God sent the ram in place of his son. So in that instance, God tested Abraham with a no. So in that instance, you know, sometimes God will tell us no to test us, to test our faith, to see what we're ready for, you know. And then, so we move on to instances when, another times when God tells us no. So you got 1 Kings 19, 1-4, and it's the story of Elijah when he gets done prophesying and people chase him out. He's in the wilderness. Keyword, the wilderness. It's not like a reoccurring thing, but anyway, he's in the wilderness and he lays down, he's tired, he's hungry, he just tells God, just take my life. I'm tired, I'm worried, I'm no better than anybody you sent before me, he said, just take my life. And God told him no. In a similar instance, you know, we got Paul in 2 Corinthians 12, 7-9. Paul discloses with us this conversation that he had with God about a thorn in his side. You know, he said, Lord, remove this thorn from my side so I can be perfect for you, so I can worship you. Take this thorn away from me. And God replied to Paul and he said, no, I'm not doing that. That thorn in your side keeps you humble. That thorn in your side helps you recognize your need for me, because if without that thorn in your side, you claim you would be perfect, you would grow to not need me. You would grow to be unable to recognize how much you need me. And because of that thorn in your side, you are made perfect in my sight because of your faith in me. Likewise with Elijah, when he told him no, he told him, no, I'm not taking your life. I'm not causing you to die. Later on in Elijah's life, he got to ascend to heaven in a blaze of fire and chariots. So sometimes God will tell us no because it's better. He has better things in store for us. And sometimes, you know, we can't see that, and we never will be. So my last point, it's getting kind of loud because I think kids are getting picked up from school. My last point is Luke 22, 42-43, and this is Jesus praying in the Garden of Olives when he was talking to God about dying for our sins. He knew he was going to be crucified, he knew he was going to be tortured, he knew what was coming. He was so stressed to the point where his sweat was like blood dripping from his body. It was that thick, it was that heavy on him. And Jesus was praying, he was like, God, if there's any other way, remove this cup from me. And my angel actually had to come down and bolster Jesus' faith. And Jesus even prayed more earnestly after that. He said, God, if there's anything you can do, if any way we can do this any other way, can't let this happen. And God told his own son, no, you got to do this to save us. And because of Jesus down on that cross, when we have disbelief, when we show lack of faith, we don't have to be punished like the Israelites for 40 years. We don't have to be stoned. We don't have to be hung from a cross because of our sins or anybody else's sins. We are already forgiven because Jesus died. And so sometimes God will tell us no because of what he has in store, what was his will, which is even Jesus had struggled to understand. So, you know, those are some examples of what happens when God tells us no in the Bible, and like different ways people reacted to it. But this is the 3 things you should do. You know, I've came up with when God tells you no, you should accept His answer, because that's the first step to, moving on or whatever. And acceptance can be different. You could accept it and mourn. You could accept it and sit down and think about it for a little bit. You could accept it and just run with it. But like we've seen with Abraham and Isaac, they both accepted God's answer. They accepted it, and they were, he waited 3 days and he went to do what God told him to do, and he found out later on what God was doing. But at the moment, it was no finding out. Abraham got what he could, what I would call a no, and it was a no to test his faith. And so then we obey his judgment. A lot of times we might think we know what's good for us, and we might think we know what's better for us and better for us to do, but we don't. God knows better. It's better. His judgment is way, way better than ours. So a lot of times it's the answer to obey his judgment, and you can see that with Abraham and also with Jesus. He had to obey that judgment, and it's like acceptance. Obedience comes in different forms. With Paul and Elijah, Elijah's obedience was to eat and keep on going and do what he had to do. Jesus' obedience was going to the cross, was being tortured, going to the cross and dying for our sins. Abraham's obedience and Isaac's obedience. Abraham's obedience was to take his only son that God had promised him, that Abraham longed and waited for many years, to sacrifice him. Isaac's obedience was to be the sacrifice once he realized it. And so obedience looks a lot different in a lot of different ways. And it's not necessarily giving up. It's not giving up to the world, but it's giving in to God's will. And I'll say that again. It's not giving up to the world. It's not giving up, throwing your hands up and quitting. It's giving in to God, letting God take over, surrendering to God, because in the end, that is true victory. And then, number 3 is just faithfully walk it out. Faithfully pick up that cross and walk it out. That's what you got to do. So, you could look at it and at the examples. Just think about it. What if the Israelites would just walked it out? Like, you know what? The guys you tell us to fight are giants. They're huge, but this is what you told us to do, and this is our promise. Not only would a generation not have had to die, but they would have had 40 years if they did not have to spend wandering around in the wilderness, hungry, just unsure, at the mercy of the elements. But they would have been in God's glory 40 years earlier, and you see what happened when Abraham walked it out. You see what happened when Isaac walked it out. You see what happened when Paul walked it out. You see what happened when Jesus walked it out. And if Jesus didn't walk it out, I wouldn't be able to sit here and be talking to you. I wouldn't be able to sit here and tell you, hey, this. I wouldn't be able to sit here and even say anything to you about faith, because technically I wouldn't be what's the word I'm looking for? Qualified. I wouldn't be able to do that, but because we are made equal and because God died for our sins, I can come out here knowing I've had past sins, and I probably don't sin tomorrow, and still talk to you and encourage you about faith. And that's the beautiful thing about it. You can wake up tomorrow knowing that your sins are already forgiven, and that all you gotta do is wake up and serve God. And so I'll go back over it. First, accept and know it. Accept it. Second, obey it. Obey whatever God's judgment is, obey it. And whatever that looks like. And 3, just carry it out. And if you do that, I promise you'll find peace, glory, and just joy in the end. It may not come immediately, but I promise you, sometimes hoping for a miracle and begging for a miracle even when God's told you, people might encourage that, but sometimes, just accepting what God has given you and just walking it out, and just being like, okay, whatever your will is, God. Sometimes that's the true miracle that God has for you, and it's better than the miracle you were asking for at the time. So this video probably ran a little long. I hope y'all can hear me well, but I just want to share that with y'all. Y'all have a good day. Be blessed. Peace.